Hello, everybody. Welcome to another instance of the CMES book talk. My name is Ahmed Shamsi, and today we are going to discuss Fatwa, the making and renewal of Islamic law from the classical period to the present by Professor Omer Awass. We're very happy to have him here in person. Professor Awass is Associate Professor for Arabic and Islamic Studies at the American Islamic College here in Chicago. He has a PhD from Temple University, and we're very grateful to you who attended in person and those of you who are attending on Zoom to join us today to hear, first of all, a 15 to 20 minute introduction by Professor Awass on his book, and then some discussions between him and me about which we try to draw out some kind of deeper issues that appear in the book, and then if there are people in the audience here or online who have questions, also consider them towards the end. So let's start. Professor Awass, hand it over to you.
Let me begin by thanking the Center of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Chicago, Professor Shamsi, for being discussing. I'd like to sort of begin with a story before we do have a sort of PowerPoint. Sort of a quick story. Time, just 20 minutes. Sure. So naturally, this book comes out or emerges from a PhD dissertation on the same topic. Of course, much revised since then. And but as any graduate student looking for something to write about, what your PhD about. And as I was sort of exploring, it struck me as interesting that fatwas represented a kind of, a way of examining Islamic contemporary trajectory of Islamic law. And so I kind of began with that mindset to sort of explore contemporary transformations of Islamic law through fatwa. But as I began to sort of research the topic, I realized that not only can we talk about the future trajectory of Islamic law, in fact, we could probably write the story of Islamic law as a whole through fatwas. And so that's what I ended up proceeding to doing. Of course, the other project of just talking more specifically about the contemporary Islamic law is the future book project of mine, but of course, this is the product of what I've been able to write so far. And so with that, I guess I will just sort of give you some basic descriptions of the book and the PowerPoint presentation that we have, and Tom is putting it up there. So on the second slide, the description. Generally, this sort of presents the history of fatwas from the classical, post-classical, and modern periods. And the book structure is pretty straightforward in the sense that it's chronological. It has a chronological framework proceeding through the three major periods. But it tries to tell the story of Islamic law by what I would say following the fatwa. Primarily, it looks at the internal dynamics of Islam and the construction of the Islamic legal system. Of course, there have been other outside contributions to the development of Islamic law from other civilizations that were integrated within Islamic law. Those are not in any way to be diminished, but this one tells more of a sort of an internal story, or from the internal dynamic story of Islam. But what is a fatwa, for the sake of those who may not know exactly what a fatwa is? I define a fatwa, for the sake of this work, as a statement, oral or written, that establishes the legitimacy or lack thereof of an action, position, or practice, and is pronounced by someone who is vested with legal authority, whether the origins of that authority in lay political institutions, or simply religious or social sphere. Of course, another aspect of fatwas is that they're non-binding. They are sort of pre-legal matter, one can say, and they're non-binding in nature. And then as the book tries to explore that some of these fatwas then become, codified, or not codified, but sort of established as law or fiqh, and then become binding on those who follow them. The book excludes any discussion of qada, another kind of judgment that is made. These are judges' decisions. These are decisions made by not judges necessarily, but jurists, in other words. And those play an important role. So what are some, and the second slide is this distinctions of the book. Yeah, it's okay. Well, some of the distinctions, I'll just go ahead and talk about them. Yes. I think the book has a sort of a historical breadth to it. First book that I'm aware of, at least, that addresses the entire history of fatwa in English. Of course, there are works in Arabic and perhaps in other Islamic languages that address, histories of fatwa. But as far as I know, this is a work that is the first work that does it in English. And then through that history, I look at the transformations of the practice of fatwa through the different ages. The other element of the book is that it has a wide geographic span. Every major region in the Muslim world, called the Muslim world, is represented, from sub-Saharan Africa to South Asia, including North Africa and East, Central Asia, and so forth. There is one exclusion, unfortunately. I wasn't able to include representation from Southeast Asia, but I will pledge that in the upcoming work on contemporary fatwa that Southeast Asia will be represented. And that was just because there wasn't enough time to sort of write that in the time that the publishers have given me to make additions to it. The topical scope of the fatwas addressed, they include everything from environmental, fatwas on distribution of water resources, for example, as an example of environmental, to economic discussions about what constitutes interest or usury or even cash waqfs, social issues of marriage, political, jihad, fatwas on jihad are in there, and religious fatwas about the matters of ritual, for example, prayer and poll taxes and so forth that are more religious in nature. So, usually, often, this topical scope is interesting because often discussions on Islamic law tend to handle, at least in my reading, I should say, tend to handle specific topics, and they tend to be, current issues of ritual or issues of sometimes marriage and divorce, and it's kind of sort of restrained off of those things. This work, in a sense, helps sort of expose the topical breadth of Islamic law by showing that it addresses many spheres of life. Another, aspect of this book is its inclusivity. I analyzed fatwas from all 6 madhabs, so it's not a particular school of thought or what we call school of law that's represented. All of the major madhabs in Islam being surviving madhabs, I should say. Although there is some discussion by jurists who had schools of law that had now become extinct are also represented there, but those schools are, but at least all 6 of the madhabs, 4 Sunni madhabs and 7, I'm sorry, I should say 7, I miscounted. So there's 4 Sunni madhabs, 2 Shiite madhabs, and 1 a much lesser known sect in Islam, which is the Ibadi sect, and that is represented as well. And I think what I've tried to do is make it a sort of a readable work. by as much as possible by keeping out or making the technical discussion as simple as possible and not using as much technical language within the work, because I wanted it to be something that an informed reader. It's not necessarily that it's made for a general audience, but an informed reader, an undergraduate student who's taken courses or is in Islamic studies, I believe should be able to read this and kind of understand what the sort of basic discussion taking place. I think some of the other additions that I made at a later point were perhaps a little bit more technical. We can discuss those, but in generally, when I originally wrote the work, it was, it was designed to be very readable. All right, well, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. What were my aims in this book? My aims were to examine the formation and transformation of Islamic legal discourse and institution by following the fatwa or analyzing fatwas throughout the course of Muslim history. I think the second point is already kind of addressed in the first, so it's redundant there. My analysis, draws attention to the way in which fatwas contributed to the formation of Islamic legal reasoning in Islamic schools. Try to do that. So in essence, I try to chart the establishment of an Islamic legal tradition as a whole, the fatwa. Now, there are some larger aims of the book that are not addressed directly, and this is something that I believe you need to read through the lines, I think, of the book. It's not something, of course, the book only has a limited scope, but I think what the book tries to show is that it's that throughout reading all of the different periods and how Muslim societies were coming across new things and we're trying to address them, at least in this case through fatwas, it really tells a lot about how a civilization faced with certain challenges of history tried to devise distinctive strategies, practices to sort of cope with those problems. And it also shows how Muslims in each historical period asked different questions, a different set of questions about the world and the kinds of resolutions they came up in regards to those questions. Essentially, then what we come away with from the larger aims is that the queries reflected these queries that were asked and were attempted to be answered, reflected Muslim concerns about how to live a rational and ethical life, negotiated through distinctive forms of rationality, values, and practice. So, in terms of time here. All right, so talk about general methodology. I tend to think that a lot of, especially in Islamic studies, have what I would sort of designate as the 5P approach. Often one can look at a particular topic from a perspective of a person. Another time you can look at a topic from the perspective of a period of time, that major focus, or the perspective of a place, a particular region in which you are exploring, or in all of these cases, I suppose, you could be looking at a particular principle. In my case, the unique angle is trying to look at Islamic law through a particular practice, and that is the practice of fatwa making. And so what I try to do is fatwa is a kind of a thread in which I weave through the story of Islamic law, going through many different persons, many different periods, many different places, and many different principles. And the fatwa is the sort of common thread that sort of ties all those things together. So that's the sort of general description of the book. And I guess I'll try to use what remaining time that I have to sort of go through some of the topics. And I've gone through a summary chapter by chapter under this sort of approach of looking at the major topic, sort of exploring, or what I was able to call through the major argument in that chapter, and then a sort of some conclusions about that chapter. So chapter 1 obviously deals with the very early period, what I'm calling the Fatwa in the prophetic and post-prophetic period, tries to trace the discursive origins of Fatwa by examining Fatwas from the early period. The major argument here is that Fatwa production process is fundamentally dialogical, a dialogical activity, or that has its discursive roots in the way the Quran and the Prophet interacted with the early Muslim community. And what I mean by that is generally most Islamic studies students are aware that the Quran was something that was revealed over an extended period of time. And often when it came to ethical and legal issues, it was addressing events as they came. And so that approach, that sort of what I call a dialogical approach, gets reflected in early practices of fatwa. So the conclusion of this chapter is that Islamic law is something that's organically grew out organically out of the promptings of everyday life, and that's what we get from fatwa. It's Islamic law doesn't have its fundamental roots in state or it's a non-state in terms of its legal roots. All right, and the second chapter, I call it Fatwa in the Classical Age, and this basically handles fatwas that were from the late 1st century to the 3rd century to discover sort of the early features of fatwa making during this period. And the major argument I make there is that Islamic legal norms and injunctions that were promulgated in this formative period, the formative period, meaning the period before this chapter 1, became interpreted, applied, and reinterpreted in various historical and cultural contexts through the process of iftah, or the issuance of fatwas. And though the conclusion reached this chapter is that the past was normative, and we'll see that that theme comes up again in later chapters, that the past was normative and served as a source of guidance for issuing new legal opinions. And one of the things that emerges from this chapter is that we begin to see the forms of legal reasoning that get established in later works, more sophisticated works of Islamic legal discourse, are often sort of emerge or were embedded in fatwas and kind of deduced from them. All right. So the next slide deals with chapter 3. The topics there chart the formation of Islamic legal theory and Islamic legal doctrines, more of a historical kind of presentation. It explores the role of legal activity and also the formation of Muslim society. There is sort of a short discussion about that. So the argument there is that fatwas, or at least the argument I try to make, were fundamental to the formation of these discourses and institutions as a form of legal reasoning and authority were embedded with it. Religious discourse and legal practices gave a distinct character to the Muslim community, also was an element handled. So the conclusions in this chapter are basically that the substantive and formal roots of these disciplines and institutions like usul and fiqh, madhabs, and so forth, emerged from the fatwas of previous generations jurists. Another sort of conclusion reaches that we have a section where we're discussing the textual authority as a defining feature of Muslim society, using the sort of Quranic epithet of people of the book modeled community. And as for chapter 4, again, so chapter 3 and chapter 4 are basically less of a discussion of fatwas, but seeing what the impact of developing a tradition, developing a legal tradition that emerged from the early classical period. So there's no, direct fatwa discussions here, but I try to sort of delineate the relationship between the past to Islamic legal tradition, and how fatwas emerged, the role of fatwas in the emerging legal schools relationship between them. The argument here, and this one, is that Islamic legal tradition is what I try to argue, a dialogically negotiated discursive tradition. Using Talal al-Asad's seminal concept of a discursive tradition, but I tried to sort of modify it by bringing in another element, is the idea of something being dialogically negotiated. We can talk more about that during the discussion, if you like. And also in this chapter, I give a sort of a delineation of how madhabs develop. But what is a madhab? What is a school? Basically, I define it there as it consists of several layers of precedential legal opinions, which are canonized in certain texts. Conclusions of this chapter is that fatwas become stratified within the framework of madhab. So the classical period, there wasn't any sort of major constraints or discursive constraints on the issues of fatwas by muftis, but with the development of something called the madhab, you begin to see the stratification of or fatwas only taking place within certain discursive groups that are established by the school of law. The next, so I'm running out of time, so we just have 2 more chapters. Basically, in the chapter 5, I begin to show how those discursive rules get, played out in real life fatwas from the post-classical age. I'm defining around 1100 to 1850. And in the next chapter, I deal with colonialism and how that changed the society's character, as well as represented a challenge to Muslim legal tradition, legal institutions, and that how that eventually introduces new discursive shifts, practice of fatwas. And at the end, that post-colonial production of fatwas are characterized by historicity, hybridity. I'll talk about that if anyone wants to explore it any further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and I have questions.
Sure.
So the first question, my first question, just for the benefit of the students here who still haven't finished their PhD, is: can you tell us, like, how you got to this topic, like what, not necessarily how you got interested in Islamic law, but how did you come to the project, in the sense of, were there things in the field before that you thought needed challenging, or what was the itch for which this is meant to be the scratch, so to speak?
Okay, well, as I mentioned in the earlier part of the story, I mean, naturally, that's a PhD student, sympathize with that. You're always trying to find sort of new avenues to explore a topic or a field or discipline. And so, as I'm sort of exploring, it occurred to me that, no one really, at the time, initially, I was interested more or less in how Islamic law is dealing with challenges today and what trajectory it's going to have in the future, as I said. And so I thought, okay, well, what's the way to sort of explore that, right? So you have theoretical works on Islamic law, contemporary works on people who try to sort of lay down theories of how Islamic law should be formed by these kinds of things. But I didn't really want to deal with things from a sort of philosophical perspective, from a pragmatic perspective. What are the practitioners in the field, saying or doing with regards to Islamic law? And so it occurred to me that, what are the practices in the field? You have sort of classical manuals or fiqh manuals, and there hasn't been there have been some efforts to write new manuals, but and so what is it that's sort of new? How does Islamic law address issues that are contemporary? So it occurred to me that the cutting edge of where to explore that in fatwas, because that's society is trying to from an ethical legal perspective. But as I mentioned, as I was kind of exploring the topic further, it occurred, I had another itch, as you put it, and that is, well, no one has really even written a kind of history of Islamic law through some of these, through this particular practice, which I came to understand as I was exploring the topic, and as stated that really this is the atomic unit of Islamic law. Islamic, at least my argument, is that Islamic law was something that constructed from some basic social engagement between lay or religious lay people and religious specialists. And from there, as I try to chart see how successful it is, a kind of discourses are beginning to develop, practices, and institutions. And so I thought, okay, this is an interesting way of not narratively telling Islamic, but telling it through legal cases, showing one legal case after another. This case. And so I sort of revised my decided to write this more historically broad work. Interestingly enough, I discovered later, and I have that quote in my proposal to university presses, H.A.R. Gibb, perhaps 100 years ago, which I discovered later, and that mentioned that it would be very interesting. No one's really ever written a history of Islamic law from the perspective, but that would be an interesting thing. So that was sort of like a vindication to some extent that a big figure like him had also, had thought of this, but at that time it worked out as far as I can tell. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you could provide further.
As you said in your presentation, you are looking at a practice that is somehow initiated by lay people who are asking for the fatwa, who ask the religiously related question, and it is answered by those that they entrust with answering this question. So also not necessarily officials or state actors, and their answers are non-binding. So this is a extremely kind of informal. In its original practice, of course, it becomes formalized, but originally a very informal practice that is, as you said, kind of non-state related practice. So the story you're telling of Islamic law is a story of a phenomenon that is not necessarily related or connected to the state. Now that is kind of runs counter to normally what one would consider to be law, because law needs. At least in the usage of the English word law, you would have some institution that is capable of imposing sanctions and enforcing decisions. So how would you explain this? What is the connection between Islamic law and the state? And of course, that is, you're thereby also making intervention into current discussions of what Islamic law is.
Right. So I think in the modern period, tend to think of as being just something that is projected by, especially the modern nation state system, that law is the domain of the state and not non-state actors. I think in pre-modern periods, we see that law, case going sort of Roman jurists as well, it's the case of Jewish law as well. People found that to be at least from an ethical and so in different societies, so we have to sort of, walk out of our modern shoes or put ourselves in another context, which, or at least in this particular situation, the law wasn't necessarily, developed by the state, but something that the state eventually adopted as a sort of what I would say was a sort of a compromise, right? That these figures, these jurists, scholars, developed a charismatic authority, and they had sort of trust of the people to some extent. And then the state actors realized in order to gain legitimacy that they had to sort of adopt the law in lieu of these scholars, or what Hodgson called piety might, giving some recognition to the state, in which they did. We acknowledge the king, right? At least most sects did, or at least in the early period. And we acknowledge the caliphate, but the caliphate has to implement what became known as Sharia Islamic law. And so you have a different sort of history of a law. You have a different sort of development of law. Arises from what we would call civil society actors, and is cultivated by civil society actors, and then eventually makes its way up. Now, not that the state itself had no contribution to it. We know that certain decisions by leaders, political leaders, ended up in some sort of filtering into the law adopted by jurists. But the cultivation of the law as in large part was by what we would call the civil society. And then the compromise is reached. We need their legitimacy because they have charismatic authority with people. Politically, there's always instability in the Islamic period, rebellions and so forth. And it's a kind of informal compromise. It's not like that any of them sat in a room and said, okay, you're the caliphs, and we're going to make this deal. There's a kind of an informal, I believe, an informal agreement that you acknowledge this Sharia that's being cultivated by us. You implement the Sharia, at least at the social level, and we will acknowledge the caliphate will say that people have to sort of abide by the king. And so that's the sort of informal bargain that was kind of struck. And then that's how law becomes a part of the political apparatus as well. Now, I want to rewind a bit because I had another dimension to your question, which is how does this non-binding thing become law? Well, I traced through the book about how this sort of non-binding, other works have already been done before, of how these fatwas start off as non-binding, but certain fatwas, the many thousands, get somehow over time by these jurists get selected and become more established, they become fiqh. So they evolve from being a non-binding fatwa to what is seen as more of a binding fiqh, and then that gets implemented. The fiqh gets implemented by the state, or the fatwa in some cases, jurisprudence. And so there's, so that's why it's a sort of, I portrayed it as the atomic measure, because it begins off as something basic social interaction, non-state actors or civil society members, and then eventually it evolves to become more established. More established as law, and then it's fatwas start off something. Some of them eventually make it.
So let me just ask a little bit more kind of in detail about this issue. So in a sense, you're arguing that this informal, or let's say the non-binding, non-state related practice of fatwa is prior to the state, the law that is embodied in the state and implemented by the state. But I'm just wondering, do you mean historically prior or logically prior, in the sense of when we start with the figure of the Prophet. The Prophet, I don't know, decided on the matter of taxation. That was also state law.
Right.
So it's not that, I mean, there is basically my question here is your conclusion in a sense already determined by the topic that, or by the aspect of Islamic law that you study, in the same sense that if the blind men who are studying the elephant, if you study the legs, then the conclusion will be that elephant is very solid matter, rather than if you study the trunk, then you'll find that it's a hollow matter. And if you study the part of Islamic law that is informal, that is done by private individuals, that is not binding, and that will be the thing that in the foreground. If you were to study tax receipts or court documents, you would see Islamic law as a totally different thing. And so the question is, are we thinking of fatwa as an aspect, the characteristic, so, or do you
Right, no,
understand?
so I don't make an argument in book. This is the only way. This is the only thing that make up. It's an atomic unit, but there are many atoms. And so it's not the only element. You argue that it's a very influential. So, there are many elements that go into, but here we're addressing one particular aspect, which I believe is a very fundamental aspect. Strong determinant, more so than other aspects. But in terms of your mentioning of, yes, the Prophet as also a political figure, well, indeed, the sort of in the very beginning, political and sort of being much meshed, but eventually, especially that we see a set of divergence between political authority and religious authority. And so the religious authorities, to some extent, start realizing it's hopeless to try to capture the state. And the best thing we can do is, lay out a vision for society, but cultivate ethical teachings or teachings in which the society can instruct. So there is a divergence very early in Islam. And I talk about that in the book. So after the very early period, there's a sort of a divergence that develops as a result to some, and religious political courses in some early period begin to sort of find some sort of compromise. So it's not the only dimension of studying the law. It is a dimension and a very important one. So, and that's what I tried to argue.
My final question before I hand it over to the audience is, to what extent does one way one could characterize the modern period is either as a crisis or at least a kind of fundamental questioning of religious authority, which of course also puts into question who can give fatwa, and whether what the situation is, because the process of fatwa giving is a process in which the questioner puts him or herself into a situation of acknowledging somebody's superiority in terms of religious knowledge. So how does that work? And how does that change fatwa giving, or does it in any fundamental way?
Yeah, I mean, as a chart in the modern period pointed out, there's now talked about during the post-classical period, fatwa stratified set of discursive practices. In the modern period, which I document here, in particular, fatwa of Rashid Rida, central to its fatwas, where he begins to challenge this notion of, whether we need to sort of restrict ourselves to what we see in the first Fatwa. He's kind of an early scholar at this point, and he's not being as in your face about it, but by the second Fatwa, it's quite clear that towards the end of this month that he's being very dismissive of that and this kind of sort of restrictions on how propagated by religious person. And so this this whole sort of edifice of how fatwas were made for 7 years now begins to be challenged, and you see in the modern period every sort of declaring a certain religious right is much more restricted, but now the view is much more to give just fatwas. And so there's some element of groups who came to the notion. The established legal schools, established fatwas, want to do without. Now, interestingly enough, in the post-colonial period, so we have a sort of new development of new institutions of trying to address many of the sort of colonial, post-colonial challenges. And these are sort of fatwa committees. And in the fatwa committees, you don't have a single method. New institution of, in this case, the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, which takes Muslim jurists from all over the sort of this world, brings them together yearly or every 2 years to debate major issues from stem cell research, capitalism, kinds of modern concerns, let's put it that way. And they attempt to sort of study the matter. They bring specialists like economists, biologists, if it's stem cell research, so that an issue is addressed, and it's addressed in committees. And so there's a sort of a vote in which, so that's a new sort of discursive practice that develops in the late stage. And so that's what I call in the last, as I was trying to point out last slide, this notion of hybridity, where if you look at those fatwas from recent post-colonial institutions, we find that they're very historical in nature. They refer to the history, they refer to the tradition, they refer to past sources. But at the same time, you find that they're adopting principles, well, not new, but sort of adopting new practices like multi-method jurists getting together, not really enforcing their own schools of law, but sort of coming to what they think for Muslim society. Is that law? No, it remains non-binding, but if institutions were to develop in the future, or if the state, in the case, state adopts a particular position, then in that case, those things. So now we have addressed, state muftis issue fatwas, and in some cases the state adopts those somehow, whatever sort of Islamic law they have dictates. So we're in a sort of a period of flux, and it's the sort of future project.
Thank you very much. I think it's now time to open up the floor to questions in the audience.
Do anyone want to manage the questions? Or just
I would say start with the mirrors.
okay, all right, sure. Go ahead.
So thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask this issue of fatwa. How did it play a role, I guess, all the well, I guess, it feels like at least, I don't know, it felt like in terms of also the issue of like at this time, there's also works of adab that are trying to stress the idea of developing more person. So that's
Right.
where I'm
So, actually, yeah, I have written an article called Fatwa, Discursivity in Betting, published by JPR 4 years ago. Where I talk about the notion of fatwa as an ethical embedding instrument or device. I don't include, it's a kind of a theoretical element, which I think is more complex. This book is more readable. And so I don't include that in this particular book because the focus of this book is on discursive practices and reasonings, distinct forms of legal reasoning, than it is about exploring wholeheartedly the ethical dimensions of it. But interesting. That part of it explores that dimension of discursive and non-discursive dimensions of it. Discursive ways in which social ways in which federal government systems. And I lay out a particular mechanism in that article, how that takes place. The social, discursive, and the non-discursive take place in terms
of. Yeah, thanks so much for the talk. The book sounds really interesting. I just wanted to ask 2 questions, actually, if that's okay. One is just, what are some of the sources you use for the early period, particularly the 8th and the 9th centuries? And the second question is, how are you able to kind of track the emergence of the madhab through the Fatwa? What are some of the discursive practices, I guess, that you're able to, through which you're able to analyze kind of the emergence of the madhab? Or some of those practices, for example, citing the people of Iraq and then Abu Hanifa specifically, and then Abu Hanifa's madhab or something like this? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, in terms of the sources, they may be considered fiqh at this point, but in my definition of a fiqh, I use some of the early sources that written by major jurists like Shafi'i's Kitab al which, you know, I consider at the time of its writing, time of its collection, it is a fatwa man because it's not quite binding quite yet. It becomes binding, or some of the opinions within that work, other works similar to, become binding later. The formation of schools of law and establishment of particular compendiums, particular discourses there. And then you have Hassan Shaybani, many of his works. So I use these sort of sources, which, you know, may be considered, I consider them in much respects, or at least some of them have to do, like, you know, his work, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani's work on rebutting Nina is like, which I use in the work, but also it's sort of exploring different issues. And so these sort of typical works that are out there that have adopted sources of fatwa matter. In terms of sort of how fatwa becomes, you know, becomes to influence this you know, stratification, develop madhabs or schools of law. In that case, what you have is what I try to argue. These early, you know, so the opinions of these early jurists somehow rise to become authoritative, and the legal methodologies employed in their, or that were embedded, at least within their fatwa, you know, implicit, explicit, become the sort of the fundamental features, or at least alleged fundamental features that become to define particular school. So first of all, you have authoritative figures that in some sense displayed unique dimensions of reasoning, not just legal opinions, but perhaps, you know, interesting unique dimensions or distinctive dimensions of legal reasoning that sort of, you know, you have a sort of followers who group around that particular figure or figures, and then eventually take those sort of embryonic, let's say, embryonic opinions, embryonic forms of legal reasoning, and sort of develop them further, and then develop a sort of stratified, and the sort of stratification goes from the early period as being the most authoritative, and then I have a sort of a diagram showing, if you look at it, that early 2nd, 3rd century scholars, jurists, become the sort of special period which become most authoritative figures, and using their particular discursive practices, forms of legal reason, and then in a sense enshrining that particular, in a particular sort of structured formation. All of the sort of jurists who come after that develop those whole, sort of begin to hold, in the hierarchy, lesser and lesser positions. So when madhabs become codified, at that point you have the sort of lesser jurists, and their job is to basically, sort out different opinions that have already been decided. Sense, come up with new opinions based on, the rules that were established by the early, what I call madhab predecessors.
Thank you so much for your talk. So far we've been talking about the authorities. I have a question about the procedure. So obviously you're looking at a lot of different periods, so I expect be a lot of different procedures. But I'm curious to know whether that played a part in some early fatwa were transmitted part of letter, one person to another, others were posted and posted some way, somewhere. In modern times, we have even social media playing a role. I don't know if anybody has tried to create or state that. So my question is not only about how many people would be able to access, but also like what do you think of the medium and news?
Yeah, I mean, fatwas initially were sort of early transmitted, like sort of period in which writing begins to take hold, and say middle part of the 2nd century, we begin to see this in the latter part of the 2nd century, we begin to see sort of collection of these opinions, other works, and sort of put in sort of narrative text, and to some sense canonized the expression within different schools of thought. And so, so they become collected, they become a part of fatwa manuals, and that became a sort of tradition. The fatwas of a particular jurist in later periods are collected because they're seen as authoritative, being influential in terms of modifying the memory, establishing something with them. And so, they were, sort of collected eventually documents to be sort of put into sort of narrative form into books. As the practice of what is known as tadween, writing, begins to take hold with the availability of technology, change in mindset also from an oral culture to a written culture, although it's not that black and white transition. And so they begin to sort of, be collected. Like I said, I treated some of these early works that kind of see fit manuals as what they were at the time, with seeming this definition of fatwa, which is a set of works that have a shape or the ones in the abounding madhab that's in my mind, that's a sort of collection of jurists. And then in subsequent periods, these things get, greater and greater sort of collection. Fatwa, see and others that are sort of multi-volume, Fatwa, which are works that are collected. If you are interested in preserving there was something I did want to say in sort of related reference to the question.
Let me just go back. I mean, this is a different trajectory, but in historical practice, we also have things that have nothing to do with the main line. So we have fragments of papyrus with Fatwa that don't come from any collection,
Right.
or we have mentions of a Shia authority communicating secretly certain fatwas only to a number of people who then transmitted as letters.
Right.
And then in modern periods, we have different mediums. So my question is, regardless of the main trajectory, do you think that the procedure matters to this atomic element, the way in
Right. Often, so there's this notion of the transmission of these. So even if they did go into sort of we also have to transmit orally through authoritative sources. They go back to the source. In this case, that's Muslim tradition mentions that there are what is known as the Islamic traces. In the early period, traces the origins of respectful to particular people. Of course, that's a subject of controversy and academic discourse. To the questions, and so you have a very sort of fluid way in which they get trained, but then they sort of become thing once they become written. So there are many, many ways they were letters. So for instance, the fatwa that I handled there on by the Hadi al-Haq becomes sort of one of the main figures in the Sayyidi Shia religion. He gets a letter from his main follower, I forget his name, in which he writes to him, asks him about certain things. This is actually a letter, but then it gets incorporated by later people in the Zaidi tradition to Kitab Lex that came in many different ways, or letters or so forth. Just consolidate most of that. Yeah, and I didn't explore that historical dimension of it in great detail. It's something to explore for those who are interested in social history. An element of social history fatwas themselves, but even in the process of preservation, and that's something we're talking about students.
Great, yeah, thanks again for the compliment and said. Just like thinking about the Quran, like the root to me occurs quite casually, non-technically. It seems to be like a synonym for sa'ala, just to ask for something. And it's used in narratives to talk about, like, just characters use it seeming in a non sort of technical capacity. Like, can you sort of trace the outline of how this term becomes technical and how like the person who then engages in this practice of the mufti eventually becomes a technical position? And is there like sort of this middle period where like early companions or successors can just give fatwas without sort of the later sort of legal baggage that comes with the actual practice and the position of people engaging in that practice?
You're right. I mean, in the Quran, the term fatwa is sometimes used case of them asking Prophet Joseph, and now what you asked me about in terms of your dreams, I've already, so there's sort of a non-technical religious, like you said, just ask question and respond. But when we look at the term as used in Quranic text in other situations. It's seemingly much more technical, much more sort of what I try to sort of use, that it's because it's asking about what would be considered legal or ethical matters. Consumption of alcohol, menses, or the many other issues that are addressed that become a part of legal matter. So this is a very specific question in which people are looking for ethical, if not, as you say, legal advice. Prophet is a legal figure as well, about how to sort of practice their religion or practice a certain. And so those, yes, and I have a discussion about that. Those things are kind of the embryonic beginning of this notion. And when I say embryonic beginning, I don't mean in a historical sense, I mean in an epistemological sense of this practice within specifically the Muslim society. One can argue that the Jewish tradition already, there's a sort of different type of this giving, but in Talmudic tradition. But here, at least epistemologically, this is the sort of thing that sort of unfolds them asking. That's what I talk about, that character influence, because fatwa is a dialogue, right? It's the dialogue between the non-specialist and the specialist, where the non-specialist comes to the specialist and asks them about how, how to sort of, about some issue that they need to address so they can structure their lives.
Is there any element to it, in the sense that if any of your students says, hey, Professor Awass, how do Muslims pray? You ask, is that a fatwa?
No, I mean, these are new issues.
No, what I mean is, like, in the way that you use it in your book, anybody asking somebody like you who's a learned person, is that a fatwa, or do you have to say, oh, 1 second, I have to put on a different hat? This is my fatwa hat I'm just putting on now.
Right. We're talking about an early community here.
Sure,
An early community that is trying to define its. So it's coming to this authoritative figure. The way it's portrayed, that it's coming to this authoritative figure, asking, we want to know about these things. Not only in the Quran, but documented sources of them asking and wanting to know how to structure it in the. And so they have come to an authoritative person. So in terms about basic important issues of practice, and they're getting a response either from or they're getting it from. And so what we're saying is that these are sort of embryonic practices. Now, they could have been neglected and they could have died off. But what we're saying is that historically, that kind of dimension sort of continued. So this is we're not saying that fatwa was fully, or the practice of that was fully developed from the very beginning, right? So you have this sort of, in most like any sort of discipline, right? You have sort of embryonic ideas and embryonic practices that get adopted, and some don't, and they develop and are cultivated, developed later, and they become sort of more full-blown. So we're not saying things were full, but we see the sort of elements of them or the embryos existing, and they get developed in much more sophisticated fashion. This practice now is very stratified and structured and restricted.
But are you saying that today that simple type of fatwa doesn't exist anymore? Because that would seem like today fatwa is only you have to go to international
Well,
experts.
no, that fatwa still exists today, and there's a fatwa innovation, just trying to inform you. So sometimes there's already an established legal, so I focus on things that have to do with the real, what I think is the real job. And then there's the sort of pedagogic job. you come to a scholar just because you're not informed of something that's already established. And so there is those kinds of fatwas, and those are run-of-the-mill fatwas, and you have them all. Is unique, but then there are other situations where this is a new thing that we're facing, and this is what the book focuses on: those new situations that Muslims are being faced with, how to track. So I focus on those kind of. So there's this sort of pedagogic book where you go to a learned person and you ask them a question just because he's not giving you. They're basically answering your question. So to talk, and the kind of thing that takes place online, as you mentioned, electronic or online fatwas, those are not necessarily given. It's just sort of educating people about what they need to do.
So ChatGPT still already gives those. I find.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, about both, but have you found jurists using the word fatwa in this broad sense of furor of the as opposed to just fatwa as, like you said, new scenarios that are coming up through time? Like, have you found this usage? And how did you come up with this definition?
I'm not sure I understood the question. If you could rephrase it.
Yeah, so I mean, the definition that you provide for fatwa is very broad. It seems to include a lot of the furor of the substantive law, as opposed to the law, for example, right? So my question is basically, how did you come up with this definition as opposed to what I've seen definitions that are a bit more, they're not as broad, and they focus on the second part that you mentioned of like Awass and new scenarios that are coming. And so I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I just try to think about what a fatwa is and what it tried to do, try to form it, how it's practiced historically, and then sort of came up with a particular definition. Trying, in most cases, what I think the real job of fatwa is trying, trying to address, new issues, and so that is the sort of angle in which I try to sort of view the definition of the fatwa, but that's the point of the fatwa. So just those things, just answering these questions.
We'll ask one question from the chat here as well. There's Arash Tavakuli is asking, what do you make of the argument of while halak that a lot of furor works are to a big proportion abstractions of fatwas? Do you agree with this observation? And second, Sharani mentions in his autobiography that he read the main Shafi'i fatwa collections from Kafal up to his teacher Al Ansari. Do you know of this practice of reading fatwa collections as a way of education, and was common to as part of the legal training for advanced Sharia students? And if not, why could this be the case?
Yeah, so the answer to your first question, yes, I do kind of agree with halak, and it's stated explicitly. The notion of that fatwas are abstractions or tajdeed from, or fiqh or law are abstractions from those fatwas that become authoritative and now are abstracted and put into this form, which they become binding. So I do agree with that sort of formulation of how fatwas become transferred into fiqh. I didn't, to answer your question about the training of a mufti, I did much less work on that, about the mufti, as I was focusing on the practice and not necessarily how authorities, being cultivated and trained. And so I didn't do much about that, and I can't really say whether that's sort of an established practice, that how a person became a mufti in the earlier period. Certainly, I've done some in the modern contemporary period. I've done some. 'Some. 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 ' course of their training, but not in the classical sense. That's sort of just one of those questions that the book doesn't really try to answer, as it's focused more on the sort of practice than the development of certain education. Certainly no book can handle everything.
Yusuf, you have a question about just I wanted to make sure that I understood.
من كثر ما توكس
So is it
تلعب
that
كرة
you mentioned Fatwa is
جت لعندي
always
هذا
been
حق الشعب.
classified as the active Ibn Fatwas, and then some of these fatwas became binding, which means that it became authoritative based on particular doctrinal principles belonging to whatever method. Then the others remain non-binding, which just remain as like imams, scholars, jurists, such as given personal fatwas to individuals. So is that the broader sense that you're looking at from?
No, I mean, so, well, I just want to make sure I understand where you're coming from. So basically, there, there are, as you point out, fatwas that sort of rise in authority and become more established, and there are those that do not. And in fact, one case I analyzed one of those that do not. For instance, the judge, he has a certain opinion in terms of how to handle a particular criminal case, and argues his position from a Maliki perspective, but that his position never gets adopted. And so there you have an authoritative figure who is arguing for a certain position, and all of these one of these major figures in developing. Then yet his particular fatwa is not adopted neither by the political authorities in terms of addressing time, nor by the, as far as I understand. And it becomes one of those fatwas, a part of his collection of works of his fatwa people can learn from. Certain strong, but nevertheless, the other authorities seem to take that position. And so there are these fatwas, that's not necessarily what the imams just the imams or in basic society just take sort of their training in Islamic law and give people answers. It's different kind of thing. So here's a case where they're addressing new issues, but their answer to it is not necessarily accepted by the people in school, and then it becomes remains.
So all legal decisions are related to scholars are considered fatwas in that broader sense.
Yes, yeah, the broader sense of the early period, because we're saying that this notion of bindingness is a later kind of formulation, because in the early thing you just have debates between Muslim jurists, right? And it's only binding to the people who follow that sort of charismatic or epistemic authority, and choose to develop it. So the bindingness is sort of a later process in which that even all of the imam's opinions from within the school are not even accepted as the final representation of the doctrine of the school. Some of them, most of them do, some of them don't, and other sub-jurists, if you want to call them, argue for this is more consistent with what the principles of the school that were allegedly developed by the predecessor, and therefore this is seen as something that's more consistent with the adoption. So yeah, the early period, we could say all of the opinions. I mean, I'm taking that line that all of the opinions were just again, because they were not, there's nothing to make them since binding risen in school formation quite yet. There isn't these things that establish their forever whoever follows sort of charismatic or stuff. And then these things get refined for some of the opinions get adopted. So that's a sort of line I'm taking in terms of process.
There was one more question from the audience. Joan Skolok, are you there? You want to ask it in person?
Yes, so thank you. Wonderful lecture. We're going to run out and buy the book. So one thing I wanted to know is, did you consider the jury consult in your,
I consider the jury counsel.
okay, you don't know what I'm talking about. In late Roman law, you have people called jury consults. And they're called that because, among other things, they give opinions to people, but they also give opinions to judges who are judging cases, which I know muftis also do. They are individuals. They are sort of experts in law, and they are considered authoritative. Their works are collected into books, and they become actually eventually part of the collection of Roman law. They're actually put into the codes. So there's a very interesting parallel to your muftis from the situation of late Roman law. And there's a question, is it independent invention? You know, it's just the same legal systems reaching sort of the same process, but at the same time coming from a more, or sort of a small group of people with their own law that was distinctive from other people's law, which is the Roman case. Or is there some actual sort of inspiration in how to institutionalize these advice givers from the late Roman situation?
Reference to your question about whether the Roman juriscounsel is considered in the book, as I mentioned in the very beginning of the lecture, that I focus basically on the sort of the internal dynamics of Islamic history, and in terms of that effect of that. So no, I don't deal with a lot of the outside sources. There are other works that do. Patricia Omer and Lina Salamia, also pronouncing the name correctly, that talk about other outside groups or other civilizations and the impact they might have on Islam. So I don't consider those sources. But in terms of the inspirational sources, I believe you might have used that term. What this work tries to argue is that the inspirational sources come from within, and largely because we don't historically, for instance, see early Arabs before the 7th century developing a sort of jury council system. You had custom, you had tribes and you had customs, and they don't have a legal system or a legal culture. But all of a sudden, within the early period of Islam, you begin to see the development of a legal culture, as I argue elsewhere, and this sort of legal practice of fatwas. And what I'm arguing is that much of the inspiration, although not although maybe influenced by also outside dimensions of the history of the religion. But I'm arguing that at least the very embryonic inspiration sources to the development of the practice of fatwa come very much from within. And one would have to explain that if obviously in the case of Roman law and juriscouncils, Roman law sources, even Jewish law and sort of fatwa practice there, that was not something that we see prior to Islam practiced amongst the Arabs or the early adherents to Islam. And so all of a sudden, soon after their adoption of Islam, we begin to see that this practice develops fairly early, and the historical sources indicate. And so one has to sort of then ask the question, what are you, to use your term, inspirational and even epistemic sources of that? And I try to argue that those are internal, without necessarily diminishing that external things outside of the faith might have played a role in the development of the Islamic system as well. But I focus on sort of internal issues.
And just to add to this, I mean, there are some areas, like in Muslim Spain, for example, which there is, I think, a rather likely connection there, where you have judges that have a kind of that have a council of muftis that they are asking for opinions for their decision. So there are different ways in which muftis can be included and integrated to a legal system that are kind of regionally specific to specific legal tradition, like local legal tradition. So that might be locally adapting pre-Islamic models of
Mhm.
of what the judge, for example, how the judge gets to his, gets to his specific decision.
I was thinking more in terms of a conquest situation, which you have in Spain. In other words, it's not what you do in the desert, which is its own tradition, and they have people who give advice and all this sort of thing. We know that's very simple. But then what happens when you conquer an empire, or parts of two empires actually, and have to run them? And then a lot of questions of how you deal with situations that arise and so forth. And of the institutionalization, that's what I was talking about, not the original, but actually fitting it into something might have, in a situation where you are sitting now in Iraq and Syria and so forth, and no longer centered, well, you were centered in the desert, but no longer, the majority of the community is no longer living in the desert. And so you're in a position of having to make some adjustments to that, and inspiration from what was already there on the ground they said, oh, well, they have something that's similar to, why don't we do that? Let's make it that way. I mean, people do stuff like that. All
I'm
conquerors.
glad you clarified.
Conquer
so that
population.
I can-
No, that's what I'm talking about. No, I'm not the inspiration for the beginning of it. I said for the institutionalization of the movement.
Okay.
It's arriving at that point where you, yeah.
So certain practices, so for example, I handle the, as you point out, particularly the fatwa, or what I'm calling a fatwa, Umar, in regards to haraj, or in regards to land taxation.
Right.
Historically, we know that the system of land taxation that Umar adopts in his quote unquote fatwa, legal decision, in this case, he's a political figure, so pick up the judgment, adopts is the practice already with the Roman and the Persian empires had already been practiced.
Yeah, right. It makes sense.
Yeah,
All
so
conquerors do that. All conquerors.
here's the interesting, so that's the sort of point of convergence. He doesn't really come up with a new idea of how to tax people that has already had existed in the civilizations prior to Islam. But what I'm arguing is that now the legitimation or the ethical embedding, to use the term that I use in here, now that practice of land taxation now is argued from a different value perspective and embedded in a different value perspective. Because when you, in the book explores that, his argument for why we need to adopt this practice and not take the previous practice, which is to distribute the land to the different soldiers who made the conquest, which was the case prior to that. He uses very sort of Quranic values and Quranic injunctions to make his argument that we need to adopt this land taxation policy as being more fair, because we don't want wealth to be concentrated within, and he uses a particular Quranic verse to say that the Quran prohibits wealth concentration within one particular or set of individuals, small set of individuals. And so that becomes, he adopts a particular practice from another civilization, but he embeds it or legitimates it in another sort of set of values.
Yeah.
So here's the part where you have originality, where
Sure.
I can just, sorry,
No
to
argument.
chip in. I don't know if you, John, if you know Mathieu Thibier's book, it's called The Invention of the Qadi. So that is a book that deals with the late antique precedent to some Islamic legal institution. That includes also mentions of the jury council.
Okay.
As a bibliograph, as a reading suggestion.
All right, well, thank you so much. This has been now exactly an hour and a half, which is, I think, a nice sweet spot. Thank you thank you very much, everybody, for attending online, in person, and of course, primarily our author and presenter, Omer Awass. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you all, both online and those who came in person, to engage in this dialogue with me. I very much appreciate it. You know, again, dialogical engagement about the book, and it helps me kind of refine my own ideas about the future. So thank you very much for coming, and let's keep up the conversation.
And those who were wondering, we did not agree on a color scheme today. It just came naturally.
No, okay, great. So,